They called it a routine search and made her strip, mocking her silence like she was nothing. But when her back was exposed, the hanger went still. Inked across her spine, a full eagle crest, laurel and arrows, the words Presidential Service, and a single blue star above it. The SEAL commander stepped in, saw it, and froze. No one understood what he whispered, but she did. And from that second on, everyone in that room knew they'd crossed the wrong woman. What came next was never supposed to happen. Welcome to The Human Stories. Before we dive in, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? And if you think stories like this deserve to be heard, hit the subscribe button and stay with us till the end. They had no file on her before 2014. Nothing that made sense anyway. A blank resume, a reassignment form without a prior base, medical clearances stamped by offices that didn't exist anymore. She showed up quietly, assigned to Logistics Support Group 7 on the southern perimeter of the base, listed as civilian contractor, non-critical clearance, living in an auxiliary barrack reserved for temporary admin overflow. She didn't speak unless necessary. She didn't complain. She didn't belong. They called her the Ghost in Bay 4. Some thought she was Army, some thought ex-Air Force. No one was sure. She wore no patches, carried no visible ID except for the low clearance badge clipped to her utility belt, and kept her sleeves rolled down. Even in the desert heat, her job was basic. Inventory updates, fuel logs, shipment verification. She moved from hangars to the supply bay with quiet precision, often before sunrise, always alone. Even her meals were off schedule, taken either before the mess opened or after it closed. No one remembered her speaking at breakfast, not once. It was Staff Sergeant Corbin who first tried to talk to her beyond protocol. He made a casual remark about her working late, something harmless, and she just looked at him. Not rude, not cold, just as if she were calculating whether it was safe to respond. Then she nodded, almost imperceptibly, and walked away. Corbin said nothing after that, but others noticed. Some joked he'd been shut down by a ghost. Others weren't laughing, because slowly, inexplicably, things started shifting around her. On 3 occasions, classified crates arrived without notification, but were logged correctly under her signature. When asked, she produced the manifests with the exact stamp codes matching the Pentagon's back-channel routing system, something only high-clearance transport officers usually touched. She never explained how she got them. She just said, "Check the seals," and walked off. They were always clean. Then came the drone delivery incident. A Reaper had landed off course due to guidance errors, and the techs had no idea how to reset its onboard diagnostics. While they scrambled, arguing over protocols, she walked past, climbed up, and tapped a sequence into the console without asking permission. The screen lit up green. No one knew what she entered. She said nothing. The drone lifted off 15 minutes later without a glitch. One tech asked her afterward, half joking, "You used to fly these?" She didn't smile. She just stared through him and said, "Sometimes." That answer echoed for days. The rumors grew. Some said she was former special operations. Others insisted she was just lucky, or maybe mentally unstable. But whatever she wasn't harmless, not completely. You could feel it. It was in the way she moved, measured, alert, like someone who scanned exits before entering a room. In the way her eyes tracked everything during security briefings, even though she wasn't on the list to attend. She'd linger in doorways, invisible to most, but watching. Always watching. That's when the resentment began. Not fear, resentment. Resentment from men who wore their ranks loud, who'd bled for stripes, who saw her as an anomaly they couldn't control or explain. Sergeant Dane was the first to act on it, loud, cocky, with a recent deployment under his belt and a need to assert dominance wherever he went. He mocked her during a field drill, shouting across the range that logistics shouldn't be snooping around live zones. She didn't respond. He wasn't satisfied. He followed her after dusk, tried to corner her behind the comms shed. No one knew exactly what happened, only that Dane showed up the next morning with a bruised jaw and a fractured ego. He claimed he tripped, but everyone knew he hadn't. Command didn't intervene. She wasn't theirs, technically. Her file led to no one. Her supervisor never raised issues. But tension simmered. When something goes unexplained for long enough in a closed system, the system rejects it. She became a disruption, not by action, but by existence. She was too silent, too capable, too precise, and above all, unafraid. That's when the request for internal security clarification was sent. An informal note, unsigned, routed through a side channel and flagged low priority. But the result was clear. She would be revetted on base. Every file, every clearance level, every tag. It wasn't an official audit, it was a message, a warning masked as procedure. But she didn't protest. She showed up at the time, listed, sat in the holding bay without a word, gave them her badge, her pack, her boots. Never asked why. It should have ended there. A routine sweep, a few questions, then back to the bay. But Dane pushed further. He'd been waiting. He leveraged the audit into something else, a full inspection under suspicion of the unauthorized access to defense terminals. False, of course, but vague enough to proceed. He assembled a team of 4 men, 2 MPs, 1 junior intel officer, and himself. They met her in the hangar at 0630. She was already there, standing still in the middle of the concrete bay like she'd known. She removed her jacket when asked, then her belt, her boots, her outer layer. They told her to stop, but Dane waved it forward. "Keep going," he said. "We need to verify markings, scars, any anomalies." She didn't flinch. She slid her shirt over her shoulders, slowly, methodically, folding it as if this weren't the first time. The others hesitated, unsure. Dane didn't. He circled her, arrogant, amused, until he saw her back. That's where the setup ends. What followed wasn't in any protocol because no one had ever expected to see what they saw. Not here, not on this base, not on a woman they couldn't even file properly. And above her waistline, below the neckline, in perfect black and cobalt ink, was a symbol that didn't belong in a place like this. A presidential seal, modified, unofficial, flanked by an arc of stars and a single blue star at its crown. It wasn't just a tattoo, it was a warning. And somewhere far above their clearance levels, someone was already watching. The moment Dane saw it, the grin on his face broke. His amusement dissolved into confusion first, then something colder. He didn't speak. None of them did. The tattoo didn't shout. It whispered. Its details were too perfect, its lines too sharp, too exact to be personal ink. And there was something deeper in its geometry, something old. The blue star at the top, faintly glowing under the fluorescent lights, was what froze them. They didn't know what it meant, but they knew it wasn't meant to be seen. Not here, not by them. She remained still, her back exposed, shoulders drawn tight but calm, as if she'd expected this silence. One of the MPs shifted his weight. The junior intel officer whispered, "Is that even real?" But Dane didn't answer. He stepped back, visibly unsettled. He looked to the far end of the hangar, toward the command corridor, and made the call. "Get Commander Rourke." They weren't supposed to, not without formal escalation. But this wasn't covered in the handbook, not in any briefing, not even in the archives they had ever accessed, because this wasn't military, not in the conventional sense. This was beyond. When Commander Rourke entered the hangar minutes later, the air had already changed. He sensed it before crossing the threshold. Too quiet, too still, too focused. The MPs stood at attention. Dane frozen in front of her like a man who'd triggered something sacred. She didn't turn. She didn't cover herself. She didn't need to. Rourke's eyes locked onto her back. He took 2 steps, then stopped. His breathing shifted. Something in him recoiled. And in that silence, he whispered words he hadn't said in nearly 2 decades. Words only a handful of men alive would even recognize. "Ghost Protocol, Level 0. The MPs exchanged looks. Dane stepped closer, voice uncertain. "Sir?" But Rourke didn't answer. He was staring at the tattoo, his gaze locked, his posture rigid, like he'd seen a specter. His lips parted, but no orders came out. Then he turned, sharply, and ordered everyone out. "Now, clear the room." They hesitated, unsure whether he meant it. He snapped again, harder. "Out, all of you!" They filed out, slow, rattled, eyes darting between her and the commander. She hadn't moved once. Rourke waited until the last man exited, then closed the hangar door himself. When it sealed with a low mechanical hiss, he stood in front of her, took a long breath, and finally spoke. Not as a superior, not as a commander, but as a man reaching backward into memories he had buried. "I only saw that mark once," he said quietly. "In Kandahar, 2009, right before a convoy disappeared without trace. I was told to forget it, to scrub my report. You don't exist. Not officially, not in this uniform, not in this century." She turned her head just slightly. Her voice was steady. "Then why are you still standing?" He didn't answer. He simply nodded, once, slowly. Then he opened a secure comms line on his encrypted device and typed a 4-word message. "Tag confirmed, awaiting extraction." That transmission traveled fast, faster than anything in that base had ever moved. Within minutes, a black line flag was raised on the internal system, silent, invisible, but absolute. Security protocols froze. Clearance levels were locked. Communications were rerouted through a ghost server in Arlington. And deep beneath Fort Meade, an analyst with level 7 clearance opened a file that hadn't been touched in 13 years. Codename VERA, status, inactive/non-recoverable. Affiliation, Presidential Service Liaison Unit, defunct. Last seen, 2012. Directive, do not engage. But she was right here. Rourke watched her dress in silence, then stood aside as she laced her boots. She didn't hurry, she didn't explain, and she didn't ask for permission. When she stepped outside the hangar, the entire base had shifted. Whispers moved faster than orders. Men who had mocked her now watched from doorways. Some backed away, others stared too long. Dane tried to approach her once more, perhaps to apologize, perhaps to regain control. But she looked at him for half a second, and he stopped mid-step. By 2100 hours, 3 things had happened. Her name was deleted from the base registry. Her housing bay was cleared and sealed. A black SUV with no plates pulled up beside the hangar, driven by a man no one recognized, wearing a plain uniform with no tags. She stepped in. The door closed. It disappeared down the perimeter road. No orders, no records, just gone. But Rourke wasn't done. Something in him itched, the way her voice had sounded, the way the tattoo felt more like a key than a symbol. That night, against protocol, he accessed an old backup terminal, one that still ran off military satellite archives. He searched the mark, the shape, the crest, nothing. Until he forced a cross-reference with declassified presidential emergency logs. There, buried in a command override record from 2007, he found one entry. Agent V activated, direct presidential liaison, ghost authority, total autonomous clearance, no chain, no contact, no debrief. Observe silence. He leaned back in his chair, heart thudding. They hadn't brought her in. She'd let herself be seen. And whatever she was doing here wasn't over. The road she left on curved past the dry ridge and disappeared into federal ground where even base personnel had no jurisdiction. The SUV crossed the checkpoint without stopping. No scans, no words exchanged. By the time it reached the black compound buried at the edge of the restricted zone, the night had already swallowed the vehicle whole. Inside, the driver didn't speak. He didn't need to. She knew where she was going. She'd been here before. The facility hadn't changed. Same reinforced doors, same angled corridors designed to break line of sight. Same silence humming beneath the concrete. But the people inside had changed. They were younger. Replacements, analysts, technicians, handlers. None of them recognized her, but all of them stepped aside. Not by habit, by instinct. She was taken directly to Sublevel 5. A man waited there. Civilian clothes, sharp voice, posture like a handler who never served but thought he understood. His badge read Langley in faded gray print. He invited her to sit. She didn't. "We thought you were dead," he began. She didn't reply. He tapped on a tablet, pulled up a debriefing file that hadn't been touched since 2012. Operation Mirror Dusk. "You walked away mid-program, no extraction, no contact. You let the line go dark. We sent 2 agents to trace you. One vanished, the other resigned within 24 hours. Do you know what that means? She raised her eyes, steady, unblinking. It means I was right to disappear. He paused. Something cracked behind his carefully rehearsed tone. Why now? Why show the mark? I didn't, she said. They forced it. He tapped again, frustrated. You do realize the presidential link died with the last administration? That tattoo doesn't mean anything anymore. You're wrong, she said quietly. It means exactly what it always meant. That was when the door opened again. Not a guard, not a handler. A man in uniform, older, worn, skin tight from years of war zones and silence. No rank, no insignia, just a presence. He didn't introduce himself. She looked at him once, and he nodded. Leave us, he said. The handler objected, stammered about clearance, but the man cut him off with a glance. He left. The door sealed. Then the man looked at her and said, The archive wasn't closed. It was hidden. Until you triggered it. She didn't answer. They still remember Riyadh, he added, even if they can't admit it. She looked at him, finally. That convoy wasn't supposed to be there. You sent them in blind. And you got them out, he said. For a moment, nothing passed between them but breath and memory. Then he said it. You're still cleared. She didn't blink. Then listen carefully. She pulled a drive from her belt, encoded and inactive, and slid it onto the desk. There's a leak in this base, the one I walked into. I didn't go there by chance. Someone rerouted ghost data through a satellite channel scrubbed clean in 2011. That can only come from inside. He picked up the drive, turned it once in his palm. And you let them humiliate you to confirm it? Her jaw tightened slightly. They needed to feel in control. I needed them to believe they had the upper hand. He nodded. You let the tattoo be seen, knowing what it would trigger. It had to reach you. He placed the drive in a black port embedded in the wall. Seconds passed. Lights flickered once. Then a screen unfolded, revealing schematics, data packets, intercepted pings across darknet comms. It was worse than she'd let on. 2 military-grade information streams had been reactivated. One buried in Joint Command's secure net, the other, far more dangerous, mapped onto satellite movements tied to nuclear failsafes. Someone was testing the ghost grid, someone who knew what it was, and knew it had once answered to her. He turned to her. You sure you're ready to be back in it? I never left, she said. He opened a drawer. Inside was a case. She recognized it instantly. It had no latch, no hinges, just a surface that read her fingerprint. She pressed it. It hissed open. Inside, a compact encrypted earpiece, a comms relay, and an ID badge with no name, just a blue star. She took them silently. He looked at her one last time. No support, no overwatch. You do this. It's clean. Off books. She turned away. It always was. When she left the facility, no one followed. Meanwhile, back at the base. Rourke was still in his office when the screen in his terminal shifted. Static. Then a message appeared. Asset confirmed. Contain exposure. Prepare for contingency Echo 7. He stared at it, heartbeat tightening. Contingency Echo 7 hadn't been referenced since 2003. It was a Cold War relic. Emergency lockdown protocol for when command structure couldn't be trusted. He typed a response. The system rejected it. Then the screen shut down. Permanently. That's when he understood. They hadn't sent her to the base. She'd used the base to smoke someone out. And if they were activating protocols buried that deep, it meant only one thing. She wasn't done yet. The return was silent. No official re-entry, no authorization logged. The badge with the blue star granted her access through blind checkpoints, locking and unlocking doors as she moved, triggering sensors too old to respond to anything but command-level overrides. No one noticed her enter the base, but they felt it. The same way you feel a shift in pressure before a storm. Rourke was already awake, seated in full uniform, eyes fixed on his blank screen when she appeared in his doorway. He didn't ask how she got there. He simply stood. They pulled Echo 7, he said. She nodded. He waited for something. Orders, explanation, anything. But she only looked at him, measured, calm, then finally, "You're not compromised. Yet." He swallowed, throat dry. "Do you know who is?" "I know where to look." She turned and left, leaving the door open behind her. He followed. The base at night was quiet, but not empty. Movements continued in the shadows, guards switching posts, maintenance crews cycling generators, encrypted transmissions pulsing through fiber and air. But beneath that routine, she walked with intent, cutting through layers of false activity toward a target that hadn't revealed itself yet. She wasn't tracking people. She was tracking patterns. And the patterns had changed. Slight inconsistencies in power usage across the base's eastern wing. Surveillance feeds rerouted for maintenance twice in 3 nights. A tech who no one could quite remember being hired. A door that wasn't supposed to lock from the inside. She entered the eastern block with Rourke a step behind. 2 guards looked up, confused, reaching for their radios. She didn't stop. She walked past them, badge in hand. The doors read her first, then him. They opened. Inside, the server bank room was running hot, too hot for night cycle. Cables rerouted, bypass panels exposed, 3 auxiliary drives linked into the core system. A quiet hum filled the space like a held breath. She approached the console, no passwords. She placed her hand on the flat biometric pad. The screen blinked once, then it opened. There it was, an active feed. A GhostNet link rerouted through a Cold War satellite array listed as decommissioned since 2009. Encryption patterns mimicking old Ghost comms, near perfect. But slightly wrong. Wrong enough for someone like her to feel it. Wrong enough to know it was bait. She turned to Rourke. "Someone's watching, and they want me to bite." His voice was low. "What do they gain?" She studied the screen. "Chaos. Proof that the Ghost channel is still alive. If I act now, they catch it in motion. Confirm it's still active. And if you don't, they escalate." He stared at the feed. "So what do? We give them what they want." She reached into her jacket, pulled the comm relay, the one given to her at the black site, and clipped it to the port. The feed jumped, reacted. Somewhere out there, someone was watching a red light turn green. She leaned over the console, began typing. Not random commands, not defensive overrides. She began feeding the system misinformation, layered decoy packets embedded with echoes of her past missions. Data meant to confuse, to delay, to stretch their analysis long enough to expose the location of their retrieval endpoint. As she worked, Rourke saw the screen begin to map pingbacks. The net traced back through a commercial satellite relay into a server in D.C., but then bent sharply to a secondary node in Virginia. That was the first breach. The origin wasn't a rogue agent, it was a shell server inside a private defense subcontractor, a civilian firm with no known connection to intelligence work. At least, not officially, she smiled, barely. "Got you." She extracted the relay, wiped the console, and walked out. Hours later, Langley. The man she'd met before, the one who called himself Langley, wasn't at his desk. His access card had been deactivated, his office cleared, his name scrubbed. Even the cameras in the hallway showed nothing between 3 a.m. and 3:40 a.m., the time window when he vanished. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, silent. "You won't find him," a voice said behind her. She turned. The older man from the black site. "He was never supposed to engage you. He was there to observe." She nodded. "And what did he learn?" The man hesitated. Then, "That you're still operational, that you still make them nervous." She stepped closer. "Good, they should be." He sighed. "This isn't over. You stirred a network that's been buried longer than most of us have served." She looked at him, steady. "Then they should have left me buried with it." He raised an envelope. "There's a clean exit in here. No tail, no eyes. Disappear again, no questions." She stared at it, didn't move. "Or," he said slowly, "you could stay. Burn it out from the inside. Finish what you started." A long silence. Then, "Give me 3 names." He paused. She repeated, 3. "I don't need more." He nodded, He knew she didn't bluff. 2 weeks later, inside the Capitol Beltway, a man stepped into his car alone, like he had every morning for 20 years. He turned the key. Nothing, just the faint hum of something unfamiliar. He looked in the rearview mirror. She was already there, in the back seat, quiet, watching. He froze. "I didn't know." "You did," she interrupted. "You just hoped no one else would." He raised his hands. "Please, I didn't send the order. I was just connected, funded, protected." He swallowed. "You can't do this." She leaned closer. "You compromised a presidential channel. You moved ghost data through foreign hands. You sold access to something you didn't even understand." His voice cracked. "You're not cleared to act." She looked into his eyes. "That's what you never understood. I was never waiting for clearance." What happened in that car never made the news, but the man didn't return to work. His home was emptied, his records sealed, and for those who whispered in back rooms about secret networks and off-books agents, a rumor began to circulate that one of the old ones had returned, and she wasn't cleaning up, she was hunting. Some stories never make the news. Some heroes vanish before we ever learn their names. But sometimes, a mark, a symbol, a silence, is all it takes to remind us what still lives beneath the surface. If this story moved you, subscribe to The Human Stories, because the world needs to remember those who were never meant to be seen, and those who chose silence over glory. Don't forget to like, share, and comment below. Your voice helps bring their stories back to light.